Hey growing people, welcome to the kitchen where the food is the focus. Today we've got some mushrooms. These are baby Bella mushrooms. And we have a project today. We are going to dehydrate these mushrooms and preserve them for long-term storage. So the first thing we're gonna do is wash these and then get started with the rest of the process. Now, I normally don't like to drench my mushrooms too much because they can be waterlogged and be really soggy. So I just usually follow up by brushing off any excess dirt with a damp paper towel. The next step is slicing, and there's gonna be a lot of it. I've got 2.5 pounds of these mushrooms, and I personally like to keep the stems on as well as I can. They're delicious, and I use them in recipes. So I'm gonna slice them with the stems intact. And I'm slicing them about 1/4 inch thick as well as I can. Sometimes they'll be a little bit thicker, but I'm trying to keep them an even, consistent width. And I actually want to cut it a little bit smaller than, I think this is a good size. I think 1/4 inch might be a little bit too big, but this is good. This one here is too big. I should cut this one at least in half. Okay, that's a lot better. And the thinner you slice these, the less time it's going to take in the dehydrators. That's another good reason to slice them pretty thin. And I think I'm actually going for 1/8 of an inch. And it's okay if they break up in pieces, because when I'm all done dehydrating them, I've been breaking them up in pieces anyhow. And some of them I keep whole after they're dehydrated also. Okay, so I've got everything all chopped up. It took about 10 minutes, so not too long. And I've got my mountain of mushrooms. So the next step is to grab one of my dehydrator trays. And I am just going to start placing all of the slices on here. I want to make sure I get as many on a tray as possible so that I can fit it all into my dehydrator without leaving any spaces or wasting any space. So I'm just gonna lay them out next to each other. They're gonna shrink significantly. I just don't want them to be on top of each other. It is okay if they're touching each other, if they're next to each other, that is just fine. I'm using all the little bits, all the little crumbs, because I don't want to waste anything. I really enjoy mushrooms and the recipes that I make from them. You can see that the mushrooms are already starting to oxidize just a little bit because they've been sliced open and oxygen has gotten to them. So you can see that they're a little bit reddish brownish. But that does not affect the quality, it doesn't affect the flavor. It really doesn't matter for the end product. So if you see your mushrooms discoloring a little bit, they're not as white as they used to be when I first sliced them, that is okay. Okay, so I've got this first tray done. It looks pretty good. And I am going to put it into the dehydrator. Up next is tray number 2, and we're gonna do the exact same thing. All right, tray 2 is complete, and I'm gonna do the same thing for as many trays as I can fill up with this batch of mushrooms, and I will come back when all the trays are finished. Okay, this is my last full tray. As you can see, I only have 3 full trays and about half a tray sitting on the counter. That was from one package of 2.5 pounds of mushrooms. In order not to waste any space or electricity, I am going to grab the other packet of mushrooms and wash them and slice them and add them to the dehydrator so we can get a full batch. Okay, as you can see, I've got all 7 trays filled with mushrooms. I've got a full load, and that's really good for saving energy and not wasting any electricity when running the dehydrator. Okay, so this is actually 3 pounds altogether. I thought each packet was 2.5 pounds of mushrooms. It is not. It was only 24 ounces each. So I've got 2 packets, which is 48 ounces, and that is 3 pounds of baby bell mushrooms, all ready to go. They're looking great. Now, in terms of dehydrating them, it's going to depend on your machine. It's going to depend on your climate. It's going to depend on how humid or dry things are. So my settings might not be your settings. So I'm going to close this up and set them to dehydrate, and I will show you what they look like when they're all done. I think it's done. Okay, we are back with all of the dehydrated mushrooms. Let's take a listen. It sounds pretty dry to me, so I think it's good enough for me to put in some jars. I've got a couple mason jars that I'm going to use. I'm going to put some in here whole, or as whole as they are, and then I'm going to kind of smash up the other one and hope that it all fits. So these are quart jars. And I can just really pack it in here. All right, so that's one jar. And what I'm gonna do is keep them on the counter for a day or so, just to make sure that there's no moisture. They won't turn easily because I stuffed them in here, but I will be able to see some movement and I'll be able to see any condensation if there is moisture in here. And if there is, I'll take it out and dry it some more and then try again. But every time I've done this, it's come out just fine using this method. For this jar, I'm going to break up the pieces a little bit more so I can fit some more into the jar. And there's a lot of things you can do with dehydrated mushrooms. You can always add them to soups or stews, casseroles, anything that you like making. You can make your own dehydrated meals and put them in Mylar bags. If you wanted to make camping food or survival food, you can make your own meals this way. And these should have a shelf life. Well, they're gonna have a longer shelf life than some of the fresh mushrooms. So that's an added bonus of dehydrating your mushrooms. I don't have to worry about these going bad now. If I kept them fresh in the refrigerator, they would be bad in, within a month or so. So I'm just kind of crushing these before they're going into the jar instead of filling it up and then crushing it like I did with the other one. I don't want it to be powder, although you could make mushroom powder, and that might be something that I will do for you in the future. These I will just use in mushroom-focused recipes. And this is also a great way to check and see that they are really dry enough, and it looks like they are. It took just about 11 hours, but again, my drying time is not going to be your dehydrating time, because this is based on the machine that I use and how dry it is inside, or versus how humid it is, how thickly I slice the mushrooms. But it's all doable, and you will just have to experiment and figure out what works best for you. Okay, so this is what my jars look like. This one is not so full, but that's okay. This one is all the way full. This one is all the way full, probably because I put mostly big slices in here and didn't break them up into smaller pieces. Here's this one. So I'm actually going to vacuum seal my jars next, and then I'll let them sit on the counter and check and see if there's any condensation or any problem over the next day or so. Okay, that looks like a good seal to me. And I will put a date on it. All right, so those are my mushrooms. That is my process of dehydrating. These look good. I'm super excited for them. And they should be just fine. I'll put the date on them for tomorrow or after I check and see that everything is moving around fine. after they've been sitting on the counter for a while. And that is how I do it. If you like watching food preservation in the kitchen, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Follow along on this journey of growing and cooking and learning. Let us know down below if you have dehydrated mushrooms and what your favorite recipe is for using them. That's all for this video. We'll see you in the next one.